To my right is President Chris Summers, and to my left is Executive Vice President Matt Keogh. I'm going to read an opening statement, and then we'll open it up for questions for both Matt and Chris. Today, we would like to establish how we arrived to the ongoing labor dispute that is still occurring for many of our members in different regions of the state. The non-sanctioned strike that occurred didn't begin on February 17th as a result of one single incident. It is a culmination of frustration that has built among members since the HALT Act began in April of 2022. Despite voicing our opposition to the legislation since its inception, the climate and working conditions began to seriously erode over 2 years ago. As a result of HALT, violence steadily climbed to reach epidemic levels that exist today. As frustration grew among our members, we have communicated to the governor's office on a number of occasions and relayed to them that officers were at a breaking point and crying out for help. We brought forth a number of issues that needed to be addressed by docs and the state, as well as changes that needed to occur to create a safer environment for everyone in the prisons. Staffing issues, mandatory overtime, facility closures, prison violence continue to be brushed aside with no real solutions. We advocated for a number of benefits that were important to members like GeoPay and the death gamble legislation that were met with empty promises. That only added to the frustration that reached a boiling point in the Executive Assembly meeting on February 5th in Syracuse. Make no mistake, we have worked in good faith on behalf of our members to provide solutions to their concerns and entered into mediation with the state to bring an end to the current strike. It is quite apparent that the results of the consent award did not meet the expectations of the thousands of officers that continue to strike. We have members who did not participate in the strike and who are out on family medical leave and job-related injuries who are having their benefits canceled by the state. And to make matters worse, we now have outside influences with their own agendas now working on the behalf of a number of members that are attempting to negotiate a settlement with the state. For the state to entertain anyone other than NYSCOPBA to represent the interests of our members would be going down a path that will only prolong the strike. NYSCOPBA will continue to advocate for its members and push the state for real reforms that address the difficult working conditions that exist in our prisons. Now we'll open it up for questions, please.
Officers, we've got a number of officers out on medical leave have been forced to return to work. I mean, do you find that a violation of state and federal labor law? I mean, why haven't you pushed for them to push for their health?
We have been pushing to stop that. We don't believe they should be going in. If they're out on workman's comp or on medical leave, they don't have the documentation to go back, so we have our law firm looking into it and pushing for our members.
What do you have to say to your members about this push for a full health repeal? The governor and the legislature have made it clear that it's not happening, so where do we go from here if, your initial offer wasn't good enough?
Well, now we just have to sit down and try to we can't repeal HALT, so we need to make revisions to HALT, make it safer for both sides, for the officers and the incarcerated individuals.
Mr. President, what's the end game here? If your officers don't get off the picket line, what's going to happen? Like, where is this going? Like, what if the National Guard gets pulled away? Like, how long is this going to go on right now? Like, where is this going? It just keeps going the way it's going. What's going to happen?
Honestly, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Obviously, we are trying to get them to go back inside, and we're working with the governor's office and the department. But if they don't want to listen, like they have not been listening to us for the last year, then I couldn't tell you what's going to happen.
Do you believe the governor has the authority to end HALT through executive action? Are you encouraging her to do that?
Yes, she should be suspending under her action.
So you're saying she can bypass the legislature and do that?
I believe if she would act and call for a state of emergency, she could do that.
I attended the rally yesterday at the Capitol. Several speakers were saying, our union has let us down. Is that fair criticism?
I don't believe, have we acted in their behalf on a legal aspect? Yes, we have. Have we acted in a standard that they believe that we should be upholding? No, we don't. Our union membership has no faith in us right now. Chris and I were part of the mediation team, and they don't believe that the stuff we presented during mediation was their voices, when it was. We fielded all stuff from every regions, and we compiled a list, and that's what we went in and sat down with the mediator with. And as Jimmy mentioned to in his statement, that there's outside influences, there's proposals out there from outside influences that mirror the mediation agreement with some different wording. The difference between that was it came directly from the strike lines. I don't disagree with some of the stuff that they have in there, but it is part of our mediation agreement that once it's clear and in place and everybody goes back to work, ours would be court binding as opposed to the stuff that the outside people are trying to get the Department of Corrections to agree to without us being involved in any way, shape, or form. But understand that Chris and myself would like for this strike to end any way necessary, short of sanctioning the strike, which we can't do because that would be the downfall of the union that we represent, and the membership that's inside the facilities would lose their representation. The folks that we have on our rainy day funds would lose the payments that they're receiving because they're under discipline. And the officers that went back to work, we still represent them.
You mentioned outside forces, who are you talking about?
I'm not really sure who they are, to be honest with you. I mean, we were presented with some lists that we didn't really know anything about until yesterday when we presented them. And through social media, and I don't understand, we always can't believe what we see on social media, but through social media, it's my understanding that the commissioner was on a Zoom meeting with people from 18 strike lines and their representative, and we weren't aware of any of that unless we saw it on social media.
Let me ask you an uncomfortable question. Obviously, you're all representing docs. Are the retired correction officers causing an issue here, the fact that they're there? Are they giving them advice that isn't in their best interest? Are some of the politicians who are supporting them, are they giving them interest, giving them advice not in their best interest or in their best interest?
Well, you have the retirees out there supporting them, which they did that job for 25 plus years. So of course we're a family, so they're going to be there. Are they given bad information? I don't know that to be true.
The governor mentioned that she's working on a lot of Plan Bs yesterday. Has she spoken to any of you about what that might mean?
She has not called or reached out to me. I have no idea what Plan B is.
Well, you can read between the lines. In her budget amendment, she released that she would be allowed to close up to 5 prisons. Has she discussed that with us? Absolutely not. But read between the lines.
What would that do?
I've only got to talk to the governor once when this all started on the phone. Then I've been dealing with her staff ever since.
Do you have a good grasp of the numbers, how many striking workers have now returned to work and how many remain on picket lines?
We do not have those numbers.
Many correction officers feel you guys are more focused in maintaining a relationship with state leaders than advocating for them. What's your response to that?
We have to maintain a relationship with state leaders to advocate for them.
They seem like the deal rarely addresses any of their concerns, the so-called mandatory voluntary overtime.
So
They've got to step back.
I will answer that question. That overtime it's only voluntary. You do not have to sign up for it. It was to work 2 days doubles, and then you wouldn't get mandated at all for the rest of the week. And if you did, it would come off for the next week, and you would get paid $750. The state would be fined for making you work that.
But you are required to work 2 overtime shifts a week?
If you signed up to do the volunteer, it was only volunteer. You did not have to do it.
So there are officers that could just work 8-hour shifts 5 days a week?
Let's be clear, there are no more 8-hour shifts anymore. The mandatory overtime is through the roof. It's mainly now 16 hours.
Do you have a number of how many officers?
I'd like to clarify. There are certain facilities that our members were being mandated sometimes 5, 6 times to work a shift in a week. We have other facilities that were better staffed that were only having to be mandated 1 day a week. The correction officers instituted their own policies across the state. We called them pick-a-stick. And the pick-a-sticks started working at the facilities to help with the staffing. Some facilities where you picked 1 day a week that you can work because your child's baseball game is on Tuesday, so you sign up to work Wednesday. So you wouldn't get stuck to miss your, and then the state, as the staffing got worse, the state started mandating those folks past what we agreed upon in local agreements across the state. Each facility had a local agreement in place on how they were working mandatory overtime. And then as the staffing grew worse, the state started mandating those folks more and more and more. In our past contract, we have a side letter that said, if you are mandated to a 24-hour shift, you would receive double time payments. The state took that as permission to start sticking our people on a 24-hour shift. That was always the case because we're civil servants, but it wasn't prevalent until they took that upon themselves and started sticking our folks, and all we wanted our folks to do was be compensated for when that happened. Then the state realized how often it was happening and tried to recant some of that.
Let me ask you, you mentioned that it was February 5th. There was a statewide meeting, and what happened at that meeting that made that a relevant date? Like what's the significance of that as far as the strike goes?
That's our executive assembly, where all our members are allowed to come. It's our chiefs, our union committee members. We had the meeting. There was probably 150, 200 members that showed up, and they voiced their opinions very loud and clear of everything that's happening throughout the state with the body-worn cameras. Just picture this, that you had to wear those while you were going to the bathroom. You couldn't even turn them off. That's unfair. You have to walk through a locker room that's on recording. So that was part of the issue there to where we are now.
So let me ask you, and again, this is something I'm hearing from people not in the service, saying this is a fact or it's a truth to it. People have said these things have been building for 2-3 years. Yet it's really happened after officers were indicted in the death of Robert Brooks. What do you say to people that say
I disagree.
This is reaction? It's not me saying it, but saying, what do you say to people who are saying the correction officers, the publicity and attention given to that case put this over the edge?
I disagree. One doesn't have to do anything to do with the other. The staffing crisis started through COVID, when the Department of Corrections didn't and try to employ or pass a single person through our training academy for 2 solid years. There was no new hires for 2 years, and it's catching up with the department because people are still allowed to retire after their 25th year of completion. And there was no staff put in place, and we haven't caught up from that. What happened at Marcy doesn't have anything to do with the people that are out on the lines today. 2 different things.
2 different
Officers
incidents.
did something they shouldn't have done, and they're indicted for it. 2 different entities. One doesn't have anything to do with the other.
You mentioned body camera. Is that a factor? That hasn't come up in any of the demands or anything. Is that something that is a sticking point for the officers?
We are going on another avenue to go after that.
Do you believe the events of the last 16 days have hampered the efforts to recruit more COs and other prison employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Why would you want to come in knowing that the governor, I've had to deal with folks that are on paid parental leave where the husband or the mother and the father both work at the same correctional facility, and the Department of Corrections is splitting hairs. It doesn't say paid parent leave, it says paid parental leave. And there's a clause in our contract that covers that. I shouldn't have to call docs and explain to them what's right. I shouldn't have to explain to them that a lady that's 61 years old that works at Walk Hill Correctional Facility that has a brace on her leg shouldn't be asked to report to work. They are blanketing everybody. Sure, they gave us a number the other day of 8,000 people on strike. That includes people out on workman's compensation, people out on FMLA, and people that are out on paid parental leave that they've ordered back to work, and if they haven't came, they roll them into the strike number.
And they now are giving them AWOLs. So there you have officers reporting on crutches, had surgery on their knees, and they're telling them they can do light duty or go serve sandwiches. That's not right. Why would you want to work for a state like that?
Is that a violation of the union contract?
Being ordered back, that's a workman's comp issue. I don't know the answer to that, but if you're on workman's compensation and no superintendent has the authority, in my opinion, to order somebody back to work because they're not a doctor.
Who bears the responsibility to recruit and to refill the staff out there? Is it the union? Is it the state? Is it docs?
Well,
It's a doc's problem.
This doc's problem, but we used to always be the frontline staff, always were the recruiters. We would go out there, your brother, your sister, aunts, uncles, neighbor, friends, always got you to take this job. Now, nobody wants to take this job. You're working 4 or 5 mandates in a row with a 24-hour shift. The violence is through the roof. They don't feel like they're being protected. Nobody wants to listen. Why would you ask anybody to take this job or recommend it? They're not going to.
Do you have a number of how many people have either been terminated or have resigned since the strikes began?
We do not have that number yet.
Going back to Hall, obviously the offer to suspend programming wasn't good enough. What did you all ask for in mediation exactly, and what was the state's response to that?
We asked for HALT to be suspended from programming for 90 days
We
of
started.
the agreement that we were going to sign. 90 days, suspend the program. We all understand as correction officers that the incarcerated population is entitled to recreation. This misconception that the general public has, the media has, that solitary confinement is this hole that they get put in with no windows, when in fact they're only in their cells. They're in their cells for 23 hours a day with a static tablet that they can be on the phone with their families for 5-6 hours. That's more time a bad actor gets on the telephone than an incarcerated gets when they're in general population and they get to use the phone every other day for 10 minutes. They have static tablets. They're entitled to recreation out of their cell for 7 hours a day. These are the programming things that HALT. It takes 3 correction officers to deal with 1 HALT inmate, when it would take me by myself to take 40 incarcerated people to chow by myself. I'm tasked with 40 people where 1 HALT inmate in the RRU has to have a company officer, 2 escort officers, and an officer to sit in the programming classroom. So that's 4 officers for 1 inmate.
What did they suspend, like that 90-day suspension? What part of that did they suspend? 'Cause
The agreement was programming, and then in our agreement, there was a circuit breaker built in that if the staffing levels were 30% or greater, they would suspend programming. But part of the programming they were going to suspend were general population inmates. After they closed jobs, the correction officers monitored to make the mandated law take place, because it's that much, and we didn't have the people for HALT from day one.
Nobody ever asked the union, nobody ever asked the frontline staff what would make this work. If they would have done that, they could implement this a lot better. And there's no more repercussions. There's nothing,
Could you have negotiated this in the collective bargaining agreement? I know it's a state
No.
law, so it's probably a little out of your hands.
Not in our
Yes, it-
collective bargaining agreement, no.
And as far as, going forward, is halt, is that the biggest sticking point? Is that the number one factor?
yes, you need safer working conditions. Our officers want to go to work and be safe. That's all they want. They want to go to work. The way they walked in is the way they want to walk out. They want to be safe. I don't think that's a hard ask at all.
So can you kind of explain the daylight between what you propose and what your members are demanding when it comes to help, and why that wasn't good enough?
I don't understand that question completely.
If you proposed that 90-day suspension and that wasn't good enough for the members, to the best of your
We
understanding,
didn't say
what do
it
they
wasn't
want?
good enough for the members. We actually started out with 6 months during mediation.
But in terms of then why haven't they gone back? What did they want?
They want the
Why aren't
repeal
you
of
able
halt.
to
They want the
deliver that?
complete repeal of halt. And we can't provide that for them. So that's where our failure came. In their eyes, we can't repeal halt, so the union is failing them.
Rob, you'll be the last question, okay? Then we'll wrap it up.
I was gonna say, I know you mentioned that, you didn't want to, you violate the law. I know some years back, obviously a different profession, but there was an MTA strike where the head of that union, I think it was Roger Toussaint, was willing to go on strike to violate the Taylor law. I guess the question would be, what's the difference between him doing it and you doing it? I know very different professions, but why not take that risk that he took and go out there with your members?
If I sanction the strike, the fines would cripple us. We would be gone within 8 days, maybe 9 days at the most. And then I wouldn't be here to protect them. Who would be protecting the members that are inside the facilities, the ones that are trying to make go back in on FMLA right now? So we have to stay where we're at. We can't sanction it to protect them, to make sure that we can get their jobs back and fight for them. Obviously, with everything going on, after this is all over, there's going to be disciplinary. That was our first ask, no more disciplinary. Put them back to work, and now we're fighting for our members that way.
Sounds like you're getting what you wanted, the 90 day, it sounds like halt was suspended. What do they want? If halt is suspended for 90 days, that's what you asked for. What is it that, have you got any idea of what is it that they would want, that if the state does it, they're gonna go back?
They want work-life balance. They want family time. They want to be able to go home, see their kids, see their wife, be able to go to the doctors.
It's very clear that the governor's office is more concerned about inmate programming and inmate quality of life than the people that watch after them.
Can you just elaborate a little bit why halt is making the prisons more dangerous? Can you provide some examples?
100%. If I was struck, if I was assaulted, the most the incarcerated individual could serve in an SHU cell is 15 days. If they slash another incarcerated individual's face, the most they can serve in an SHU cell is 15 days. We proposed going back to 30 days and allowing the incarcerated folks to appeal their decision. Make them put some legwork in. If we started taking other stuff away from you, I can assure you that the incarcerated population would rather be locked in their cells for 30 days than to lose their tablet.
Very quickly, at this point, as we stand here, do you know how many striking workers have been terminated? How many have had their health care benefits taken away? Has anybody been charged with contempt? Do you expect anybody to be arrested on Taylor law violations?
I don't know how many have been terminated at this point in time, but anybody that has an AWOL, they have lost their health insurance.
We'll leave it at that, folks. We'll stick around for one-on-one questions if you have any.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Do you know the number of people still on like the actual number? You said that the state's inflated it. What's